morning. This is Pastor Ray Frank, Syracuse Wesleyan Church. And today is Monday, August the 25th, last Monday of the month. Well, I trust that the Lord has been speaking to your heart and drawing you close to Him. I was musing this week. Have you ever had a piece of furniture that maybe your grandmother's or something that was restored, made over again, made to look new, or back in its original condition? One of my treasured memories is something that a friend did for me in one of my lowest moments. The week after my wife Ethel had died, my friend Kenan Gilson came and, unbeknownst to me, had taken an old wooden rocking chair that was my grandmother's home with him. It had been broken for a long time, and he repaired it and refinished it and brought it back a few days later, and I was astonished. It looked better than it ever had that I remembered. And the treasure of that good memory has stayed with me for many years. So yesterday I was preaching from 1 Peter. In His kindness, God called you to share in His eternal glory by the means of Jesus Christ. So after you have suffered a little while, He will restore, support, and strengthen you, and He will place you on a firm foundation. Well, I talked about restoration. And so I want to think about just that process of restoration. One of the wonderful promises of God is that when we get broken down, beaten up, or have failed miserably, He will restore us. David prayed for it in Psalms. "Restore to me the joy of my salvation," he wrote, "and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." Well, whether our brokenness is because of our own moral failure, as David's was, or some external attack on our health, our finances, our family, God holds out this wonderful promise that He will restore us. Now, I know, for every Christian, we can say, well, yeah, ultimately I get to go to heaven and then everything's made perfect. But folks, I don't pass that up as God's restoration is working right now in our life if we will submit to Him. He wants to, and of course reading 1 Peter reminds me of Peter's own failure, his denial of Christ during the night of Jesus' trial, when, not denied that he was a follower, but denied that he even knew Him, swore and cursed. Well, you and I may have had similar experiences of total failure and know a little bit about how Peter must have felt, the guilt, the broken-hearted remorse, the fear that it could never be the same again. He had failed so miserably. I've had that feeling. But in my study last week, I was reminded that Jesus came to Peter twice in two different settings on Resurrection Day. The first one was private. On the day of resurrection, before He appeared to any of the other disciples. And the second one was a few days later when a few of the disciples decided to go fishing, and John talks about it in his gospel in chapter 21. And that's the passage that most of us think about when we talk about Peter's restoration. But that was a public restoration. That was restoring Peter to his position of influence, his calling to serve. Remember, Jesus would ask him, "Do you love me, Peter?" And when Peter said, "Yes, I love you, Peter," Jesus would say, "Then tend my sheep, take care of the sheep, feed the sheep." But I think the Bible tells us that Jesus met first with Peter and then the 12. Paul says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I don't know what happened in that meeting. I think it was the personal restoration of Peter's faith and his trust again in Jesus. Well, the Bible gives no indication of what Jesus might have said or how Peter responded. But I love a song by Don Francisco called He's Alive. And I think he may have imagined it, at least how it could have happened in that wonderful experience. You know, in the first part of the song, he describes how Peter rushed out with John to see the empty tomb, and then he was confused. John believed a miracle, but he didn't know what was going on. And then let's pick up the words of the song. Peter's back inside the house again, and the guilt and anguish came. Everything I had promised him just added to my shame. When at last it came to choices, I denied I knew his name. And even if he was alive, it wouldn't be the same. But suddenly, the air was filled with strange and sweet perfume. Light came from everywhere, drove shadows from the room, and Jesus stood before me with his arms held open wide. And I fell down on my knees and just clung to him and cried. He raised me to my feet, and as I looked into his eyes, love was shining out from him like sunlight from the skies. Guilt and my confusion disappeared in sweet release, and every fear I'd ever had just melted into peace. Isn't that a wonderful picture of restoration? It certainly could have happened just like that. And I trust you have had that experience of restoration. I don't know if that's, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly what happens, but I do know that Jesus wants to do that same restoration process, no matter where we are with him, if we will surrender and submit to him. Will you submit? Have a great week. God bless you.